Hey there, friendlies. How's up? Welcome to the, what are we, 21st of July episode of the Beer Blades and Bushcraft live stream. This is the second episode in my outdoors interview series. My guest tonight is a captain in the Royal Canadian Air Force. She works with the cadets program. She's been very involved in the survival schools or survival camps, I believe, in British Columbia. And she is an ambassador for the Wounded Warriors Canada organization, and her name is Jacqueline Wood and Jacqueline Zweng. Jacqueline Wood is my niece, and in the name of full disclosure, this is one of my sisters. So, hi, Jack.
Hi, how are you?
I'm all right. A little embarrassed about mixing you up with the little Jack, but that's okay because we've been doing that for years around here.
That's funny.
We got a couple of people on. I'd like to say hi to Tenenbaum, hi to Tyler. These guys are on. They spend a lot of time in the side chat every time I'm on, and every now and again they come on screen too. So we'll get to that a little later. I do want to say, in the name of housekeeping, that if you're watching me time shifted to tomorrow rather than tonight live, I do consider that to be fabulous as well. Thank you for spending your time with me tonight or in the future. Hey there, Grace. Lakes and Hikes, how's it going? So I figure we've got two big things to talk about, Jack, but let's start with the survival school stuff.
Sure.
I have a lot of survival books here, a lot of people who do what I do, bushcrafting and stuff. There's kind of a lot of overlap between the two, but I don't see them as all that related. And that bushcraft is you're out there for the love of the woods and you're kicking back, you maybe making bread in a Dutch oven over fires if you're all like Ray Mears and stuff. But survival is more like you're camping by accident without some of the comfort stuff. And I mean, we were both cadets at one point, and I took the survival weekend as part of junior leadership school at Lac Sebastien back when Air Cadets still wore green. At Lac Sebastien, there was like a survival school there. That was, I think, a 2 or 3 week program. I don't know what the programs are like now, but at that point they were, and they got dumped in the woods for a lot longer than we did. So I figure, describe to me what the current cadet survival program is. Like, for instance, is it a Tri-Forces thing, or is it just Air Cadets at the camp that you worked at?
So for us, it was just Air Cadets. It was based on the premise that you have crashed in your aircraft and now you need to survive. So you might have some things with you. You might have some airplane parts. But we essentially went with the idea that you have nothing with you. So what are you going to do in a survival situation in the middle of nowhere? You might roughly know where you are, but you can't get out. So that's kind of what the entire camp's premise was based on. And then there were 2 levels of cadets. There were the ones that were there for just 2 weeks and ones that were there for 6 weeks. So, they build on those skills if they came back for the next year.
I see. So like cadets would go for the shorter course and then go back for the more advanced course the next year.
Yeah, the more advanced course was obviously more competitive. So you had to be selected. And actually, there are only 3 of those schools in Canada that have the 6-week course.
Okay.
So you'd be selected amongst your peers. And, so all the ones that went on the 2 or 3 week courses would not end up on the 6-week course. And, so it was that more elite level kind of thing.
So that's a much smaller group then.
Yes. Now I worked in Cold Lake, Alberta, and that group there had only 75 cadets doing the 6-week courses.
Wow. Okay. So you would start off with a few weeks of theory and then end with a week in the bush or something? Like how would it break down generally?
So the best part that I always really enjoyed was on the very first night that the cadets were there, we would get them up and in the night, and we would just walk them to the forest, and we would place them in the forest by themselves, far enough away that they couldn't see anybody, they couldn't hear anybody. And all we gave them was a glow stick and nothing else. No water, no food, nothing. And we said, we'll be back whenever we come back, or whenever. No timeline. And the reason why we did that is we wanted them to feel like right from the beginning, those thoughts of what would you do if you suddenly found yourself completely alone in the middle of nowhere. And for a lot of them, it was completely new environment because they came from all parts of BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba. And we wanted them to start thinking about those feelings of the psychology of survival, because that's actually probably the biggest part. The skills are obviously important, but it's the psychology that everything is based on your decision making.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how we set things up. And then we broke it down from there and went into the survival pattern and essentially taught them all of the steps in the pattern of survival.
Yeah, that psychology thing is a big deal. I find that time and again, when you hear an interview with someone who, I don't know, crash landed somewhere and walked out of the woods, however much time later, it seems that you can have a million tools on you, but if you're not absolutely certain you're getting out of there, then you might not get out of there. And so I'm glad to hear that, because I don't remember my little survival weekend at all. Right. I imagine that they probably tried to drill that into us in like this much time, but I'm glad to hear about that, because it rings so true to me. Excuse me. So true to me. And, it's funny because I often wonder about the weird little ways that we kind of kill our own progress in life. The inner, I'm trying to translate here, the inner critic. And I wonder if that inner critic even has a chance when, like 10 years before, you were in a plane crash and you got your ass out of the jungle. Like, to you, shit already got real.
Yeah, I think there are some inherent qualities in people that they're either going to react, different people are going to react in different ways in stressful situations. And obviously some people thrive in those environments and some people do not. So I think the big thing about the survival courses is, if you break it down, it's really follow the pattern of survival. That's it. That's all you have to do. And if you simplify it and you go through each step by step, and if you know those steps, then you're going to make the right choice first. Because I think a lot of times in survival, if you don't follow that pattern, then you're missing something, and you can't do the next step properly if you miss one of those phases. For example, the first step is first aid. So if you don't address whatever it is that's going on with you, maybe it's hypothermia, maybe it's a laceration, broken bone, whatever, you're not going to be able to do much after that, because you're going to decline really quickly. So, I think what we tried to teach the cadets is that it's actually very simple. So maybe first aid is complicated, but if the first thing you need to do is just stop and assess your own physical self or mental state, then you can move on to the next step, which is fire. And if you can't do fire, you're not going to be warm. You could build all the shelters in the world. You're not going to be okay if you don't have a fire.
Right.
So those are kind of the simplified steps that make it the psychology easier when you're in that situation.
And is this pattern like a military doctrine thing, or is this sort of a universal across survival programs everywhere? Do you know?
So we base most of our material on a book called Down But Not Out, which is a military document that they don't produce anymore.
It's a classic, though.
It's a classic. Loved it. And then we also use the SAS Survival Handbook, and those two parallel each other nicely.
And that SAS, excuse me, that SAS handbook, I've got 2 copies of it, and pretty much everyone's got that, so they would recognize a lot of what you're talking about. Yeah,
that's kind of where we went with primarily. Now, if I had discussions with people about a different pattern of survival, sure. But what we taught and what I've always consistently gone with, in my mind, makes the most sense, follows those 2 books that are pretty tried, tested, and true. There's not a lot of innovation necessarily when it comes to survival. There's not a new theory on how to make a fire. That's
right.
pretty standard. So
Yeah, that's your triangle of your fire triangle, right?
Yeah, you
It
can't
doesn't change.
those steps, which I think is what is super exciting about survival training, is that, to be honest, it's breaking it down to the most simple method of survival. And at the end of the day, there are only so many steps. And it's probably why I have always felt the most comfortable in the middle of a forest, in the middle of nowhere, rather than the middle of a big city, because everything is simplified and
right.
everything is clear as to what to do. So,
and one thing that I like about being in the middle of the woods rather than in the middle of the city is everything feels kind of primordial or primeval and time honored. Like, trees don't change with 21st century cycles of progress the way everything in a city, like, you stand on a street corner today, you stand on the same street corner 20 years from now, and there's a lot of stuff you might not recognize. Whereas, like, you walk into the woods, right? You got a tasty axe on your belt or in your bag. You got a couple of very, very basic tools.
Yeah.
You don't fall into any of the gadgety stuff that people keep marketing at you. Then you or your grandfather or your great grandfather or your offspring, the basics remain the same, and there's a real comfort for me in that kind of stuff. I just want to say hi to some more people who've joined us. Fox Outdoors, always nice to see you. Lakes and Hikes, I think I've already said hi to you. I think you're from out in BC somewhere, are you not, Lakes? Serge, you're here, so now I can pour my beer and ruin it. Serge, Jack, has been on a few of my videos, and whenever Serge is around, I try to pour a beer, and it's like all ahead.
Oh yeah.
So I'm going to try to break the pattern here tonight, folks. What I'm having here is it's from Brasseur du Monde, which is a local. It's called La Soifée. I don't know what Brune Quadruple Belge would be in English. A brown quadruple Belge. Oh, piss! It's an extra strong. It's 11%.
Does that make it interesting by the end?
A lot of Quebec beer is high octane, but I find that when you go north of like 7 or 8%, the alcohol overtakes the taste too much. So, well, I got it all over the desk, Serge. So, but since we're talking about gadgets and stuff, like, I want to show something here. The difference between, because there's a philosophy in the outdoors community that, Jack, you've probably run into, that there's no such thing as a bushcraft knife or a survival knife. There are only knives. I think that's BS. This is an American survival knife. Okay. Those of you who know avid outdoorsy guy know that he used to carry one of these in theater when he was in the forces, U.S. Okay, they're ugly as hell, but they used to be very well made. Mine has a loose pommel on it, right? Break through glass, chop through the wall of a helicopter, right? Apparently, you can lash these to a stick and make a spear. What? Right? That is your standard American issue survival knife. This is your standard issue Swedish survival knife. This Falkniven F1 is still, to this day, given to pilots in the Swedish Air Force. Every bit as strong. Kind of doesn't look as big and tough, but this is a fabulous knife. But at the end of the day, they're both knives, right? They're both knives. They're both a basic tool that will get you through an uncomfortable night in the forest. Now, I asked you once a long time ago what you see most cadets bringing to a survival camp, because, of course, I had forgotten that cadets don't bring their tools to survival camp, do they?
Nope.
And I never brought anything to any cadet camp except the uniform I was wearing, some civilian clothes, and like some snacks or some damn thing. And that is still true today, right? That the cadets do not have to supply anything of their own.
That's right. So the cadet program is essentially a free program. The cadets that go to summer camp don't have to pay anything at all. And they also don't have to bring anything except for their uniform parts that they were issued already. And everything is issued at the camp. So, we also don't want them showing up with giant survival knives that, like that, because there's always going to be somebody who takes it to the extreme and might show up with a machete.
Right.
So we issue them the equipment when they need it. Now, of course, knives are always a difficult thing because you have to do a lot of training on the proper safety and techniques. And, back in the day when I was teaching at the survival school, the government at the time had issued really crappy knives that frequently just fell apart in your hand. So here we were trying to teach them, proper handling techniques and gave them the worst possible knives that were super cheap.
Nice.
Didn't
Do you remember what they were?
You know what? I don't remember what they were. But we always, for myself, I have always been a diehard Leatherman person. When it comes to, if I had one thing that I wanted to take with me in a survival situation, it would be my Leatherman. And it's just because I've used lots of different multi-tools, and that one was my go-to every time. So they did have some kind of multi-tools at one point, but I don't actually know today what they would be using. Probably something relatively cheap still.
It's probably a Gerber.
Yeah, exactly. A Gerber,
right?
Something like that. Yeah. Or even a Gerber knockoff, which would be even worse. Yeah.
I remember seeing on a forum somewhere that whatever at that point the Canadian multi-tool was that was being issued was essentially the knockoff of whatever the U.S. Marine Corps or someone was getting. And they were getting either a Leatherman or a Gerber or something. But I mean, I don't read up on this stuff all the time. So everything that I say to you that I've read about our military's anything might be 10 years out of date. Right? So
they don't tend to progress that quickly. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Might be the same still. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, so cadets show up and they're are they issued a Leatherman for the duration of the course then? These days?
No. So they would be issued the tools they need for the classes or the situation at the time. Okay. We try to keep any kind of tools like that out of their lockers or out of, using them. They are teenagers, and so they're going to get in trouble when they're on downtime.
Right.
So we tend to keep that stuff, only for when they need it.
Okay.
And the goal at the end of the course is they actually head out into the bush and, have to survive for multiple days on their own. Well, first of all, actually, they do it in a group of 2. Because it's a different nuance when you're doing survival training when there's 2 people, because now you've got 2 heads and you can change kind of what you do and how far you go with certain things. And teamwork is obviously a huge part of training. And then they do, the last portion is completely surviving on their own and starting all over again. So they move to a different site and everything is starting from the beginning. So we issue them only the basics that they need. So they would get a multi-tool. They would get a whistle for bear protection and a bell that they have to wear all the time on them because in Northern Alberta, there are many bears.
And they got some big ass bears.
They got some big ass bears.
They got the
I had a
cadet there.
Yeah, I had a cadet one time who came into the headquarters area in the bush, which they're not allowed to do unless it's like a severe emergency. They have to stay in their site to be alone. And this cadet I see kind of like peering around a tree. I'm like, what are you doing? You're not supposed to be here. You're supposed to be in your site. He's like, well, I was just wondering if I could get a new canteen. And I'm like, no, you're in a survival situation. Like, if you don't have a canteen, figure out something. He's like, well, the thing is that a bear ate mine. And he hands me his canteen, and it's got a giant bear mouth, chewed out from the side. I was like, ooh, okay. Yeah, you can have a new canteen.
Crumbs. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is the 6-week course we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
So they go twice. For how long each time, give or take?
So for the 6-week cadets, they would spend 3 days as a duo, and then they would spend another 4 days as a solo.
Okay. And so like some of the basic skills that you would teach them, I mean, obviously there's the psychology of survival, the
Big
pattern
part.
you were talking about,
Mhm.
but are they supposed, do they show up to camp already knowing how to, I don't know, bow drill, fire making? Do they show up, do you expect them to know how to use certain tools, or do you give them skills to build from?
So they would all have some, skill sets here and there based
Mhm.
on their own cadet squadrons that go out and do survival training on weekends, like you were
Right.
saying that you did. So depending on the enthusiasts, some of them are going to be really into it. Some of them are going to be, not, they wouldn't have had as much training. When I was a cadet, survival training was the number one thing that I loved to do. So
Right.
I, when I got to the camps, I was stoked and, had already read up on things and, wanted to read my entire SAS survival handbook from top to bottom and that kind of thing. So there's going to be different levels of people. But we teach everything anyways.
Okay, because I was gonna say, like, is there a? I just want to say hi to Nifty Paddler. How's it going? Hey, Simon. Salut, comment ça va? Now, guys, if you have a question that you want to ask, what I would like you to do is in great big capital letters, write question, colon, and then your question, so that Jack or I will see that there's a question that somebody wants to ask. So the question I was going to build on was, do you teach them all the fire making, or is there a specific skill that they need to know for the camp?
Okay, so we would teach them the specific skill. So the fire triangle, like you had mentioned, you need to be able to light a fire. So what are your circumstances? How are you going to light a fire? You only get one match, so it has to work the first time.
I remember that part.
Yeah. So, but we will then take that skill to, the different types of fires that you could build. So you might build a fire for cooking. You might build a fire for heat. You might build a fire, there's different setups that a fire could be put in. Yeah. So that's kind of like what you were saying, the difference between survival training and bushcraft. So we do a little bit of both. We want them to have the basics of survival, but because they're out in the bush for, 4 days for their final test, we also get them to do a number of bushcrafts, because that goes into, the psychology of survival with keeping yourself busy.
Yeah, there's got to be quality of life there. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. And just bushcraft skills, using your knots, using your knife to do different, skills and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Okay. And so, like, if I showed up to camp, and I mean, for instance, I'll tell you, my favorite is the flint and steel. I'm very adept with it. I'm very adept. I can start a fire. It's just, I'm very adept with the flint and steel. Shut up. I can do ferro rod, I carry matches in case of emergency, but I mean, to me, because I'm not a survivalist, I don't throw myself into the woods and say it's me against the woods. I light a fire as soon as the tarp is up. I light a fire because I feel that it creates a sense of place, right? It's part of my sense of, okay, this is my space for the next little while. I'm not starting a fire because I've fallen out of a helicopter somewhere and I'm, the shift has hit the fan, So, like, if I show up to camp and I can do flint and steel and ferro rod, maybe that's not good enough, because that means that I can't just grab a stick and, carve a hearth and create a fire.
It's very hard to do, by the way. We've done it, but honestly, it's very, very hard to do.
I can well imagine.
Yeah.
I carved a set
Mm.
using, I think, a mullen or something, but God, take me now. It's very.
We also did battery and steel wool. That was another one that we would.
Oh, I've never tried that, but I can imagine that's just stuff you can pull out of the airplane or whatever in some cases.
Exactly. Yeah. So you're, using what you might have with you, and knowing all of those skills is super important. And again, fire is the second step. So first aid, fire, before shelter. And a lot of people, would argue, well, shelter would be first. But again, if you can't shelter, or if you can't have a fire, if you're in a long-term situation,
then why build the shelter?
You're not going to be warm if you're under, the wing of a plane overnight. So, and shelter can also take significantly longer to do. So you might start building your shelter and now it's dark and now you can't build a fire because it's too dark to, so.
Yeah, I get it. And it's funny because that's the opposite of the way the bushcrafter does it, right? Bushcrafter puts the tarp up first because chances are it may rain on you in like 12 minutes and you're not going to know it's coming until it does, kind of thing.
Yeah, but lucky to have a tarp though. What if you don't have a tarp?
Well, that's the thing. That's where.
So now you're building a natural shelter, which takes a long time to do. And you still don't have a fire to keep you warm.
Yeah. I remember building those lean-tos, right? You lash the stick across it and then you.
Yeah.
One thing I would like to, this is beside the point, but Camille in her outdoors camp last week on Friday, they built those.
Oh, really? Cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. But yeah, I definitely remember building those things. And, at that time I was kind of like city boy stuck in the woods because I was a teenager. All I knew was that I was all like self-involved and, reading Jean-Paul Sartre because, the kind of girls I liked read that. So I was like, oh, I hope there aren't going to be any bugs in there these days. Are you kidding? I'm going to build me one and I'm going to crawl in those leaves.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay. So you've built your fire. You built your lean-to or whatever, or you're under the wing of a plane. Is water next?
No.
Water's not next. Okay, because I know that food. Everyone is like, "Oh my god, I got to get food." I'm like, "No,
food's next. No, food's last.
Yeah,
you can live 3 weeks without food, so you got lots of time. Water, you have 3 days. So first aid, fire, shelter, and then signals. So, signaling for help. Otherwise, how the hell are you going to get out of there?
Yeah.
Signal, again, depending on the type of signal that you're creating, could take time to make happen, or you're going to want that signal to be ready. So if you're making a smoke signal, you're going to want to have that ready on hand to go. And then it's ready. You hear a plane, boom, you go light your smoke signal.
I got a question about that, actually.
Yeah.
But before I ask, I just wanted a few more people who joined us. Hey, Alain Belso's here. Hey, how's it going? He says he likes the warmth and smell of a fire and the utility to cook over it, but I've never been in a situation that if you couldn't start a fire, you'd die. I hope you never are.
Me too.
Thomas Jordan, I think I said hi to you, didn't I? If not, how's it going? Quebec Homestead, hey Mallory, how's it going? Are you almost out of your 2-week step back from the YouTubes? I'm gonna try to get Quebec Homestead on for a homesteading interview. Who else? Are we good? We're doing well. No questions yet? All right. What I wanted to ask you was, last thing you said was, okay, we were talking about signals. Oh yeah.
Signals.
Okay. Say someone's whipping by in a Cessna. Okay. Beautiful cloudless day.
Yeah.
You light a fire. If they're like a couple of kilometers away, what's really is the chance that they're going to see your plume of smoke?
So the chances are good depending on how you build your signal fire. And I've made many, many, many of them.
Okay.
And there's two key things. One, it has to be able to light incredibly fast. Two, you need to have a lot of greenery
Greens, yeah.
right there waiting. So it has to be able to burn really fast and get the smoke pluming and not put it out. And then you have to have a lot of stuff close by. So one of the biggest things that we found when people were learning how to do, a fire for a survival situation, we always made them collect enough wood for 24 hours. And it is almost every time not enough wood would be collected. And you, like, to collect wood in a forest, you're not chopping a nice, picnic, camping, whatever amount of wood, like you're just foraging for wood, and the amount that you need is huge. So that was, I think, part of the biggest thing with these things don't really work. Well, they do, but you really have to have the patience to do it properly. And I think that's the biggest thing about survival training is, I think somebody said, like, I've never had to start a fire in or I'll die. And the number of people that, like, you're stressed out and you're one match. So you're terrified to light that one match or you rush it. And from my experience, like, you really have to nurture your fire. And you really have to, like, slow down and do each step properly instead of, like, it doesn't need to be a rush. Like, if you rush it, that's where you're going to get into trouble.
Yeah. And I think that's where, how a lot of people say, look, if you find yourself lost in the woods, first thing you should do is take a sip of water, right?
Just
sit down, take a sip of water.
Stop. Yeah.
Okay. What do I need to do?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I just want to draw your attention to two comments. Mallory, or Quebec Homestead, her fiance used to be in the Canadian Army. I think he was, Mallory, was he artillery? I don't remember what. But I didn't know, but apparently he took part in a few Wounded Warriors activities
a
while ago. And Thomas Jordan says, get as much wood as you think you need and triple it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's is a exactly rule of thumb.
Yep. That's a really good way to put it. Which Wounded Warriors activities?
Oh, I was going to say, why don't we just segue into that? Because you've done a lot of really cool stuff with the Wounded Warriors. You've been to a lot of places. And I just want to hear everything. Why don't we start with how you got involved with the Wounded Warriors of Canada? And hey, I got a question for you actually about that. Because I know that there's one in Canada, there's one in the States, and I'm pretty damn sure there's one in the UK. But are they all connected? Like, are they all the same organization with branches, or are they different organizations that are kind of related? How does that work?
So none of them are the same organization or connected, when it comes to, like, an administrative type thing. They're all completely separate. I'd say they have likely some similarities in what their missions are. And Wounded Warriors Canada did have some affiliation with Help for Heroes, which is the UK version. When they were starting bike rides and stuff like that overseas. But no, they're all separate. They all, and there's lots of other organizations too that are doing things for veterans or first responders, but they're all separate entities completely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So Mallory I just answered my question. Yes, he was an artillery. They did the Lac à l'eau claire a few years back.
Oh, okay. Cool. That's amazing.
Maybe when we get to the part where people can come on and chat, maybe Mallory will come on to chat. So how'd you get involved with Wounded Warriors?
So I've been in the military since 1998. That feels like a long time.
It is a long time. Yeah. We're not as young as we used to be, Jacqueline. Just want to
so I became, interested in cycling, and I had done some bike rides for charity with on Vancouver Island. One of them was called the Boomer's Legacy Ride, which was for a fallen soldier who died in Afghanistan in 2006. And his mom set up a legacy foundation to help soldiers help others. And then from there, I had heard about Wounded Warriors Canada and the Battlefield Bike Ride. And so this was also a charity ride where participants would ride for 1 week and honor the fallen, help the living. So the year that I signed up was the Italian campaign. I was so excited to go to Italy and ride my bike and also learn about the Canadian impact in Italy. And you know, visit different cemeteries and memorials and that kind of thing.
Yeah,
And
because
so
these tours are they're not just a tour of an area. You're visiting places that will resonate with Canadian history in those areas during one or the other of the world wars.
absolutely, exactly. So I signed up and I raised all my money. So you had to raise a minimum of $4,000 for the charity. And then, you know, I bought my plane tickets, and unfortunately I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And so I wasn't able to go. And so when I was diagnosed, which was in November of 2015, between the day that I found out I had cancer, I was in surgery 12 days later. It happened really, really fast.
Gotta love that British Columbia medical system when it comes to cancer, right?
Yes. Well, when you really need it, they act quickly. That's for sure. So I ended up going into surgery, and unfortunately I woke up a little bit too soon from surgery. And so I woke up and couldn't breathe because there was a tube down my throat and they had to rip it out. And then 5 days after my surgery, so I had a partial mastectomy. 5 days after that, I was in a car accident. And
I forgot about that.
Needless to say, lots of trauma happened to me in a really short amount of time. And I had a lot of post-trauma symptoms. So I knew to ask for help. And partly why it felt like that was okay to do was because of my affiliation at that point, or understanding of Wounded Warriors Canada. So that's what I did, is I reached out and I asked for help immediately. And I don't think I would be okay today if I hadn't have done that. So surgery was in November. Then I started chemo in January of 2016. And for whatever reason, in February, I saw something on Facebook, and there was the Wounded Warrior Run BC had been running the length of Vancouver Island. I didn't know any of these people. And I just saw that their finale was happening kind of close by to my house. So I thought, well, I'll go and offer my support and just cheer them on at the finish line. And at that point, I'd lost my hair. I was wearing a wig. Like, I wasn't super comfortable with any of that in public, but I figured nobody even knew who I was anyway. So I just remember seeing these people and thinking, my God, these are like the most amazing people I've ever met, and I didn't even meet them, just the most amazing people I'd ever seen, who just ran the entire length of Vancouver Island in February, and, you know, for this amazing cause. And there was some incredible speeches that happened that day. And anyway, it just really inspired me. So then fast forward to the end of that year. And I saw something on Strava that was looking for runners for the Wounded Warrior Run BC.
That's the running app, right?
Yeah, it's like a running cycling app. It's like you didn't actually run or cycle if it wasn't put into the app.
Right. Yeah.
So anyway, so on a whim, I reached out and said to them, oh, I could run. And then I realized after I pressed send, like, they were asking, I said I could run like 10K, but they run like 10K every day for 7 days in a row. So after I pressed send, I was like, oh, I think that probably sounded like, oh, well. Yeah. And what they didn't know, that I didn't tell them, is that I was still in chemo at that point. So I had to do chemo for 14 months. And I didn't mention it. Anyways, I ended up being a runner for the team in 2017. And I actually had to move one of my chemo appointments from a Friday to a Monday so that I could do it. And I did it. And the next year, they asked me to be the director of the run. So we've taken it to some new levels since then. And so I'm the director of the Wounded Warrior Run BC, but I'm also kind of the events coordinator for Wounded Warriors Canada now, and had my redemption with the Battlefield bike ride because I didn't get to go to Italy, but I did go to Vimy the following year, and then Croatia and Bosnia. And last year I was the director of the ride for the 75th anniversary of D-Day. So I call that turning lemons into lemonade.
I would say that's like win all the way down.
Yeah. Well, the only unfortunate thing is the cancer came back. So everything came back last summer. And I'm in chemo treatments right now, which is not awesome. And I still have 9 more to go. But this time I didn't lose my hair, which was nice. So I don't look like I have cancer.
Yeah. And so you have 9 left of, was it 14 you said? Treatments?
17 this time around.
17. Oh, well. So tell me what it's like to run Vancouver Island while you're doing chemo. Because you probably didn't feel like running some of those days.
No, you know what? The thing is that you literally can do anything you put your mind to. And with chemo, like there's so much that gets taken away, but there's still so much that you can do if you just listen to your body and do what you can do when you can do it. Which I think, it's a very difficult situation, and not everybody's going to be in the same place. But I think the most important thing is to always do what you can do when you can do it, because that's going to make you feel better. And there's nothing better than running the length of the island with a group of incredible people and stopping at each Legion or community center and just getting all the love in the world, thrown at you every single moment. Like after the run is over and all of us just go for a run because we feel like going for a run, you're like, how come nobody's cheering me on right now? So because the other thing is we have a full police escort where we run in the middle of the highway, and we shut down the highways to really make that impact. And so you just don't have time to feel that. You're so uplifted. Plus I'm a single mom, so the first time around there's nothing more powerful than the motivation of a child that you're taking care of. So
absolutely. They can really just by existing they can drive you to do better.
Oh my God, of course.
Absolutely.
100%. Yeah. And I'm not downplaying the fact that it's hard, because I can be very positive, but I have had many, many dark moments as well. But, that's life. Like life is never always up. And sometimes then it's inevitably down at times too. And so I think I've just gotten really good at accepting that. And when it's up, I do whatever I can to take advantage of that. When it's down, I respect myself and ask for help and ask for support and all of those things that are really difficult to do. And then it makes the ups even better. So
I definitely get that. I am
kind of like survival.
Right? I was you stole my thunder, because I was going to make that link to the basic sort of the survival mentality. I'm going to get through this. I'm going to run this 10K today. I'm gonna and now the run and the battlefield ride are completely different events. I kind of want to hear about some of those battlefield rides though, because I mean, obviously I've been following you forever because, family, but the photos obviously aren't doing the whole thing justice. By the way, Thomas is asking if you have a channel or a link to something that someone can post. What I have done is in the show notes, I have links to the Wounded Warriors Canada's Facebook page and to Jacqueline's bio on the Wounded Warriors webpage. Christ, this beer's 11%, guys. And I don't know if there's anything else that you really feel comfortable with us sharing, because everything else that I know of Jack online is kind of personal Instagram and stuff. So I don't know.
Yeah, so I don't have like a public I'm not super savvy at the Instagram. Waiting for my daughter to like
To
become
learn.
cooler than me online and show me how to do some of these things, but I don't mind people following me. My Instagram handle is at JayzVic, so JayzVic. And just to give you like why Jay-Z, because my brother calls me Jack because growing up, everybody called me Jack. My first name is Jacqueline, which is long. My last name is Zweng. And so Jay-Z is now kind of like my persona in the world. And everybody calls me Jay-Z. So that's where that comes from.
So it's JayzVic.
Yeah.
All right. I've just put that in the side chat. And in fact, your story gets even better in some ways because of that beautiful little girl of yours joined the world fairly early, and that could have gone another way. I know someone else who is in the exact same position and who unfortunately lost his daughter. I don't know, man. I feel like someone's watching out for you or something. So in some ways, you know.
Yeah, my daughter. So for those of you who don't know, my daughter was born 10 weeks early, and she was only 2.5 pounds when she was born. And again, that's like going back to a matter of survival for that first year, and you just strip down everything and you just deal with the basics. And I'm really lucky that she's okay, and she's, developmentally okay. She was small for a long time. She was like 15 pounds when she was 1. But she's 11 now, and she's great. And, we're just super lucky that, that everything worked out. And, talk about first responders, like, and the medical system and, nurses and doctors. And I mean, they just, when you need them, they are amazing in every single thing that they do. And they're so selfless. And, I'm super grateful for everything that people have helped me through, because it's been, I've had like 9 surgeries, and for 9 different reasons, really. Like maybe 9 lives. Oh no, I hope my 9 lives aren't up.
I'm just going to knock on the wood of this here table for you.
Yeah. But you know what? Everybody has things that are difficult, and these are mine. Every single person has something that's challenging to deal with, and, it's what you do with it. And, the most important thing is to connect and ask for help from people, and know that, you're not alone. That's kind of the premise of Wounded Warriors Canada as well, is to step in and provide programming for our first responders where they're not getting that otherwise, because those are our heroes that do stuff for us every single day. And we need to help them on the other side when, they are struggling and they're, not able to cope with what's been happening to them.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, because I know a guy who is now a former Mountie with PTSD who couldn't continue with his job. And it's not just cops, and it's not just soldiers. It's ambulance technicians, it's doctors, it's nurses, it's anyone who's ever been called to a shooting at a school. It's if you sort of sit back and you think about the segments of our society who are fighting through that kind of stuff. There's a lot of people out there who may at one point in their professional or personal lives end up needing a lot of help because of the stuff they see at school or at work or whatever,
Well, I think it's safe to say that 100% of people understand what mental health is, because 100% of people have had a struggle at some point with their own thoughts or their own circumstance. And, there's just different degrees to that. And the hardest thing to do, at least in my opinion, is to ask for help. And so,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, nobody wants to say they don't know something, they can't do something, they need help with something. I mean, that's the hardest thing ever. So,
It's funny that you bring that up because I did a video a little while ago about a few years ago. Sorry, I've lost my StreamYard window. A few years ago, there was this challenge that went around called the Show Us Your Steak Challenge. And it was male bushcrafters cooking a steak and talking about mental health. And some of these guys, the video that I made was why I didn't do one of those videos. It's because the other people's videos who popped into my feed were all guys saying, here's my steak. I'm going to talk about men's mental health. And then it was all, look, we don't tend to talk, we're guys, but if you have a problem, find someone. And down below, I got a phone number or lean on your friends. But the videos that I saw were almost, aside from, I think, one, they weren't, I'm in trouble. And the video that I made was like, I am in trouble. And I wanted to see more of that so that I could feel that nobody wanted me to feel lonely because of the fact that, I'm in a dark place most of my life. But because I was seeing so many videos of guys who were saying, look, we don't tend to talk because we're guys. If you're in a dark place, ask her, because I didn't see any of those, it had the opposite effect on me. And someone sort of, I got a couple of comments in the below the show notes on that video saying, take another look, or here's a couple of videos you need to see. And I watched these videos, and here were guys who, in some cases, were in a way darker place than I tend to be. And I, as a young person, I was someone who owned his inner asshole in a lot of ways, and as I've become older, I'm not exactly a senior yet, but I'm going to be 50 in 2 years, guys. My philosophy has changed.
It's my older brother.
Older. Yeah. God, so old. My philosophy has changed, because I had this realization at some point that it's a fucking truism. It's a gosh darn truism, right? Everyone's living their own private hell. Everyone. Nobody's got a perfect life. Nobody's, if someone has perfect health, well, maybe they're emotionally stunted or something. If someone's brilliant on the field, maybe their finances are a mess. So maybe someone is an epic mess. I'm an epic mess. This desk is horrible. And I live with someone who really needs things to be organized. So, but everyone's got something going wrong. And so maybe instead of allowing my own inner hell to darken someone else's day by being a great big jerk to them, maybe I should just take a step back, realize that it's not all about me, and give that person a smile instead. And I have tried to live that. I have tried to make that my mantra for the past 15 or 20 years. And I slip up bad sometimes, okay? But because my instinct is to just, but because no matter how bad, on my worst day, I know there's someone out there who's having a worse day than me. And on my best day, I know that I could change someone else's day just with a kind word,
And on the other side of that too, I think it's so important to just, it's okay to have a bad day. It's okay to be an asshole sometimes. It's okay to, not do everything perfectly. And, we live in this very, online society where it looks like everybody's doing amazing all the time. And, it's easy to scroll through millions of lives that look amazing. And why do I not feel that way? And so I think it's so important to also feel your bad days, feel them. Don't push them away. Don't try to shove them away because they're not going to go away. I think that was something, I don't even think I learned that my first time around with chemo treatments. I think that's something that I've evolved since that, it's because you're constantly just trying to chase the next good day. And when I sort of settled in this year to the fact that, you know, okay, so I'm going to have bad days. So what am I going to do on those days? I'm going to feel them. I'm going to cry them out. I'm going to not get out of bed. I'm going to not talk to somebody. I'm going to talk to somebody. I'm going to do whatever it is that, you know, like I've yelled at my daughter unreasonably and then apologized later and said, I'm sorry. In that moment, I could not control myself and I was a jerk and I'm really, really sorry. And I'm not perfect. And, you know,
that feels like crap, doesn't it? Man, I've done that too.
Oh, it feels like crap for sure. But
man.
at the same time, it's okay, because what are we trying to teach our children? That they have to be perfect all the time? Like, not possible. And I think that causes a lot of anxiety for people if they're constantly chasing perfection. That's not going to happen. So I don't know, maybe that's like a 40s revelation.
All revelations are legit.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, and then the other thing too is like all the things that have happened to me, like it's the best stuff that could have happened. It's the best thing that could have happened to me is getting cancer, because I have so much perspective that I am so grateful for. And I think I live a much better life because of it, because I understand what's important. And, you know, I'm way more comfortable in my own skin because I understand what's important. You know, so those are the lessons you get out of all that stuff. And you're not going to avoid having crappy things happen to you. It's going to happen no matter what. So
yeah. And you've definitely managed to not, you know how when some people have a massive health issue, they take that opportunity to sort of step back from being active and sort of spend the rest of their time on that. There's no freaking way. There's no freaking way. How many Battlefield bike rides did you say you did? 3 now?
So I've done 4. Yeah, you were asking about Battlefield bike rides.
Yeah. And by the way, in 3 minutes, I'll open this up to anyone who wants to come online and ask some questions or, you know, trade some war stories or something.
My phone's been blowing up on Instagram, so I'm just saying yes to these people.
Yeah, they're all good people.
Awesome.
Look, when you get on I mean, you and I are both avid cyclists. You way more on the performance era side. I used to be very avid as a mountain biker, and now I just like getting on and just so that I can clear my head, you know? I still feel an affinity for the mountain bike, as I'm more comfortable on that than on one of those, you know, the Ram
road bike
shit. Yeah. Just because I'm too fat to lean over that way. But anyway, so to a certain extent, no matter where you are, you're on a bike and you're pumping. But I imagine that beyond that, each of those Battlefield rides was very, very different.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm not somebody that can necessarily read history and then just understand it. Like being in the actual battlefield and standing, you know, at Vimy Ridge and looking out and seeing what the perspective was. Once I'd done that, everything I had read beforehand made so much sense why that was such a vantage point that needed to be taken. And also I think as Canadians, and I would say maybe especially in BC, where, you know, we don't quite even have as much history as in Quebec. And, you know, once you go to Europe and you see firsthand that building that got shot and it's still there and partly crumbled, you know, it all kind of starts to make more sense about how things played out and what the Canadians' impact was. And, you know, one of the saddest things is that, you know, it's no different than if you have an experience and then you go home and you try to explain it to your loved ones and they're like, yeah, cool.
Sure.
And you feel super alone. Like you almost have this bubble when you experience something and then when your bubble bursts and you go back and you try to tell everybody about it, they're never going to understand it. So our history is, very similar in that sense, that a lot of things happened overseas, and the Canadians had an incredible impact on what happened to the world and how things played out. But until I stood there and saw it for myself and rolled my bike through endless fields of poppies and, stopped at cemeteries and literally couldn't take a photo of the cemetery in one picture, that's how many grave markers there were, makes you really see the impact of what happened and how many people sacrificed what they were doing. So I think it's like, for a cyclist, or even anybody, it's just like the ultimate experience, because when you're cycling, you slow things down, you see more, you see these little, you just see things you wouldn't necessarily have seen before. Plus, you can also cover a lot of ground at the same time. So
it's the perfect
that
form of transportation.
Totally. Yeah, it's great. And I mean, in Europe, like it's not like Victoria where they're all the cars are trying to kill you. Like, they actually like that you're riding a bike, unlike here. So that's a bonus. It's way more cycling friendly. But the premise is to sort of follow the history of Canadians' impact on World War I, World War II. Bosnia, Croatia, was a new experience as well. And I don't know if any of you have been there, you'll know what I'm talking about, but it's just like mind blowing how much history is in those areas, and also how much destruction there still is. Like, the buildings are not just instantly put back together. There's bullet holes everywhere, and people are still living in those buildings, or their neighbors' building, house next door is rubble because that family just never came back to that building. And then learning, what the Canadians did. And unfortunately, in most cases, when the Canadians came home, nobody really cared because they didn't understand the experience that they had. So it does feel like, as an ambassador coming back, that you have an opportunity to right a wrong and tell people what happened, and, honor the fallen, that weren't honored at the time, especially in the Bosnia-Croatia kind of conflict, because at the time, the majority of people that were fighting for Canadians in that conflict were reservists. So instead of being full-time military, they came home and then their contract was just over. So they didn't even have the support of the military, because they weren't even like going to their job anymore. So those people were really forgotten. And those are people that are amongst us. They're in their 40s and 50s, and, nobody really knows how bad it was and what they had to deal with, and the politics that they had to deal with when they were there too. So
Absolutely.
yeah, so it's an amazing, it's on the Wounded Warriors Canada website for anybody who wants to take a look. I'm not trying to get you to sign up. I'm just, if you're interested in, there's pictures there from past years, and this year, unfortunately, due to COVID. So this year is the 75th anniversary of the liberation of the Netherlands. So last year we were on the 75th anniversary of D-Day, and we actually rode our bikes to Juno Beach on the exact anniversary. And so we were supposed to be there, but COVID shut that down. So we've postponed that ride until next year, and hopefully, fingers crossed, it comes together.
Yeah, that one's too bad, eh? Because, I mean, the Netherlands and Canada, there's a link there like nothing else because of that.
Oh, yeah.
I do want to say that it is 10 o'clock, so I'm opening it up to anyone who wants to come on and ask some questions or tell some stories or blah. As I always say, come on screen and chat, but we don't talk politics and we don't talk guns. Again, it's not because I'm an anti. I've got two of them myself, but I'm trying to get back into YouTube's good graces, trying to get remonetized, so I'm playing by the rules. So, anyone who wants to come on. God damn it.
I love my
But
brother.
well, I'm not usually. Well, it's 11%. I'm like, God, it's like drinking a can of wine. Yuck.
Gross.
The Vimy one I wanted to ask you about, because I mean, Vimy was big for Canada, right? There's a whole segment of this country who say that that was our independence,
Mhm,
that World War One was our war of independence,
mhm,
and what we did at Vimy was sort of cementing our place, and then because what happened after that was Borden used World War One to get Canada a place at the League of Nations, right? And Australia, New Zealand, and all those other places,
mhm,
and so it's like Vimy gets this mythical. It rings with this mythical sound in the Canadian psyche.
mhm.
So I imagine that being there must have been something else.
Yeah, it's
And
hard to explain what it feels like when you're standing at that monument. Not only like the impact of all of the names that are listed on there, but just the vantage point and looking out on the landscape and understanding how many people lost their lives in that landscape, um, is just, and the perseverance of the Canadians to keep going and to innovate in the middle of a war in order to take it down.
yeah.
Yeah. And we got to ride our bikes actually to the monument, which isn't normally allowed. You're only allowed to walk there. So having a sea of 140 cyclists with a Canadian flag at the front
Mhm.
and bagpipes, it was just a beautiful moment for us Canadians to then also share. And a number of the people on the ride actually had relatives' names on the monument as well.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, it's the impact of, a lot of people said every Canadian should go there and, kind of feel like where you came from and what happened and why we're a nation now,
Mhm.
so like we really, yeah, it's a really beautiful, plus it's all white and it's got this very, you know strong presence in the landscape. When you look in many different directions as you're even getting towards Vimy, you can see it. There's another monument called the Circle. What's it called? Circle something rather, and it's a monument that has every name of the fallen on both sides in a giant circle, and you walk in, and it's just listed in alphabetical order. And there's a small slit on one end of that monument that looks directly at Vimy, if
Mhm.
you can see it on a clear day. So, yeah, it's just the way that they've honored the fallen over there is something that just, we just don't have that here in the same way.
Right.
And nobody, they remember, they care. There's people who volunteer to look after Canadian cemeteries and make sure they are perfect every single day. And, not to mention, there's also the Menin Gate, which is in Ypres in Belgium. And this is a giant monument that they literally do a Remembrance Day ceremony every single night and have only
Wow.
ever missed one or something like that.
Mm.
Um, it's just mind blowing that people care so much and they're not willing to forget. And, it's part of their daily life to honor the fallen. It's just part of their culture.
Yeah. It's funny whenever I see those fields of names on any cenotaph anywhere, I I wonder how many of them could have been another Einstein or another
Mm,
Nikola Tesla or another.
mm,
Like I often wonder how far ahead we would be if, and you could take this way back to the 7 Years War, or like you could take this all back as far as you want, right?
mhm,
Because some dude who died on a battlefield somewhere might have been the guy who I don't even really know how to. how to sum it up in a really neat little package for you. But like, where would we be if even 6 of those people would have changed the world the way
Mm,
like an Isaac Newton did,
mm,
or an Einstein did, Where would we be today?
mhm.
Would we
Well,
be on Mars?
this year we had a veteran that came with us on the journey for the 75th anniversary of D-Day, because one of his sons is a cyclist on the battlefield bike ride. So he landed on the beach in Juneau 75 years ago. He had never returned to France since. He spent 5 years, I think, fighting through France and the Netherlands until he finally got home. Continued a military career, fought in Korea, and then was a warden of a prison as a whole nother career. He had never, ever returned. And so last year was the first time in 75 years that he came back, and we walked onto the beach at Juneau with him. And he had, one of the things he said was he spent 75 years trying to forget what happened. And now he's trying to remember again to be able to share some of those stories. But one of the things he remembers is when he was in the Netherlands, a soldier kind of came up to him, and they both kind of like looked at each other. And then he asked for a cigarette, and he gave him the cigarette. And they both kind of realized like they were on opposing sides, but then they just kept going. And neither, shot the other person. And what I think from spending time with him became really clear and really interesting was that even though there were two different sides, they were all still humans, and they were just following the instructions of their nation. And at the core of it, they were all just young men just doing what they needed to do. And there was such a human side to it, because it's really easy to just demonize the other side and they're the bad guys, but they have a whole culture and history that, those people did what they were told to do, kind of thing, just like our Canadians did. So yeah, it was really interesting to spend that time with him and hear his stories and, see him reliving it in a way, but with us and with this support of a team around him. It was pretty magical.
And it's funny because now I'm wondering, like, how many, like, Wounded Warriors Canada has a very specific mandate, but I wonder, and I'm not expecting you to know this, but I wonder how old the oldest Wounded Warrior they're helping is.
Mm.
You know?
There's a ripple effect big time where, okay, so let's say we're all talking about this tonight. And then, somebody else from here goes on to have a conversation with somebody else about something. And, it all ripples down. So, I think there's no way of knowing how many people are helped. But I think what the primary lesson at the end of all of this is that normalizing a conversation around mental health is what the key factor is. If it's just normal to talk about it, then you help people without even realizing you're helping them. You're not like sitting them down and making them talk about it. It's just part of our daily conversation. And I think that's where the real change becomes the key. And we're there. I mean, we're definitely there in a lot more ways than we used to be, with lots of different platforms. Bell Let's Talk is super popular, that kind of thing. But I think making that conversation just part of your daily life is how you make it okay. And then it doesn't feel like you're reaching out. It's just part of your conversation. So I think that's part of what is super important.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense in a big way. Because part of the problem that, I mean, men live with is the fact that there's this weird idea that, we don't talk about that stuff, right? It's a symbol of weakness to talk about your mental state when you're not doing so great. And
But
And
let's put that back to a survival situation. So here
yeah,
you are in the middle of nowhere. What are you going to be like? Oh, this is too hard. I'm just not going to do anything. I'm just
oh,
going to sit here because this is difficult. And that me just sitting here and slowly dying is going to be an easier way to deal with this. We all know that's ridiculous.
yeah, the people who do that are the ones who die.
Exactly. So you have the skills, they're in your brain. You just have to do them one step at a time. It's no different than mental health. We all know the steps. Deep down inside, every single person knows the steps. Reach out for help to somebody you trust.
Mm-hmm.
And so step one, that's the parallel there, that if you're willing to survive something physical, why would you not want to survive something mental as well? And
Yes.
thrive and have fun making a fire while you do it.
It's funny because you just reminded me of a book called How to Survive by John Hudson.
Mm-hmm.
And the only reason I'm thinking about that book is because I was listening to the Trial by Fire podcast today. And his survival book, which I will buy at some point, doesn't only cover, surviving in the woods. It also sort of draws the line between that knowledge, like you just did, and a job interview or a meeting with the boss or all the little things that happen in our day-to-day lives where that inner critic I was talking about kills us, right? Every time that's like you got something to do, or all those little failures that you didn't have to fail, but something inside you said you had to, and apparently he drives a real sort of pin into that and says, like, it's portable. These skills are portable into your normal life. It's not something that you only do if you've fallen down a crevasse on a ski trip in the Alps. It's the mentality can help you in a car accident or in maybe you're someone who doesn't like crowds and you're in a crowded metro and you're about to have like a panic attack or something. It's amazing how many little moments in the day-to-day can be helped by that same presence of mind.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, what are you going to do to survive? Are you just going to roll over and give up? I mean, it's just not so many people have asked me, how have you gotten through? How did you do this? How did you do that? And I'm like, well, what is the alternative? And so sure, people get through things all the time, but then why not add a little bit of grace to it and, reach your potential at the same time? Because then you're just that much more uplifted. And, there's only so much time on the planet. Why not, there's only so much time in a survival situation. So if you're really going to put in that effort, then why not just give it your best possible shot? And
would you say that that's where that sort of oft heard statement, don't just survive, thrive, sort of comes in to a certain extent?
Yeah, for sure.
A dark moment into your chance to sort of shine a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in any situation, but at the same time, I think the pendulum has swung a little bit in, the land of social media where everybody and their dog has the perfect quote that you're now supposed to be your mantra. And, if I heard one more person tell me that positivity was going to kill cancer, I was probably going to punch them in the face.
I'm glad you brought that up because, you're not the only person I know who's had cancer, strangely, because it seems that, and it's amazing how whenever someone sort of, because you kind of have to make an announcement on Facebook or someone's going to be saying, how come I didn't know? Right. And it's like every time it's like clockwork, yeah. Okay. So I'm dealing with, I don't know, prostate cancer or whatever. And like half the people commenting, you got this, dude.
Yeah.
It's like now, it's gotten to the point where even in any part of my life, if I hear someone say, you got this, I just want to say, shut up. Shut up.
Yeah.
because it feels to me as someone standing outside of, I saw this with you, with you, and I saw this with, unfortunately, 3 other people at this point.
Mhm.
It just seems like it's, there's sympathy and there's empathy, right?
Mhm.
And sympathy is like, geez, man, I'm sorry to hear that. I feel bad for you. And empathy is like, I don't know what I could say to you right now, but you know what? I'm going to
Mhm.
sit here next to you if you want me to until you're ready to talk.
Mhm.
And I feel that you got this falls too far on the, I'm not really engaging with what you're saying. I'm saying what I think I need to say to show you that I've read this or listened or whatever
Mhm.
without fully engaging with what's been said.
Mhm. I think
Uh,
there's like I learned a few things going through all of this, and a lot of you got this. I got a lot of those.
mhm,
Um, and first of all, what I learned is putting myself out there on social media or whatever platform is actually the best thing I could have done, because it reminded me of how many people did care when you feel like you're super alone, and you
mhm,
talk yourself into a situation. I'm a single mom, so like I talk myself into thinking nobody cares because I'm just at home sitting here. And it's like, well, wait a second.
mhm,
If I don't ask anybody that I need something, how are they supposed to know? That's not a nice way to put it in your brain. Like, oh, nobody cares because they haven't just like come knocked on my door and read my mind and done what I need. The other thing I learned is I had a neighbor who, as soon as I like early on when I had told her that I was going for surgery and whatever, she came over and she said, "Okay, this is these are the things I can do for you. I can cook dinner while your friends come and visit. I can look after Haley. I can." She kind of listed out these things, and I was like, "Whoa, nobody's ever done that to me before." Where they
mhm,
literally tell me exactly what they can do. Then I had another friend who was like, listen, I'm not good at childcare and I'm not super like caregiving, but I'll bring you a coffee if you want one. So text me. And I was like, wow. So this phenomenon that like, okay, if you just kind of say, and it could be little, like it could be, hey, I can, you know, bring you flowers once a month or like, I don't
yep,
know. Um, Fill up your wine glass, whatever. Like, it was like, okay, that made sense to me because I have trouble saying to somebody, you know, you're going to be okay. Like, what do you say? Because, but then at the other side of it, it's like, no matter what, if somebody's saying, hey, we care, that matters and that's important. And don't stop doing that. Like,
mhm,
definitely keep saying you got this if you have nothing else you can say, especially because a lot of people are far away. It's not like you could just show up at my house with a casserole, right? Like,
yeah, yeah.
what else are you going to say? Like, you're going to be okay, right? Because there's nothing else you can really do. Um, and then there's a
I would
whole group
feel,
of people that are crazy
yeah, yeah,
and try to make it about
yeah.
them.
Try negative harmonics. Shut up. Um, I guess I've always sort of approached that kind of stuff because I'm, when someone says something like that, I try very hard to actually engage with what they've said, because no one is going to go on online and say I'm dealing with massive depression, or shit, the cancer is back, or
Mhm.
I just lost my mother, or no one says that
Mhm.
lightly. And I feel that I don't always know how it feels. And it's funny
Mhm.
what Outdoor Dauber just said down here. I put it on
I
screen,
just read that. Yeah, I hear you.
I get that. And I don't want to be one of those people who says the
Mhm.
pointless little, and it's amazing how often I end up sort of, because I always want to reach out at some point. No, I never want to reach out because I feel that there's so much signal to noise nightmare happening that the person who's just said this thing is probably being inundated. So I always wait like a long, long time.
Mhm.
And I find that the honesty in me is always just like, look, I don't know what I'm supposed to say to you. I
And
don't.
you know what? I think that's the thing is like check yourself and see, are you saying this for you or are you saying this for the other person? Like,
uh,
are you saying this because you're like, oh, I have to be a supportive friend and say something or else people are going to think I don't care. Like, Or are you saying it because you genuinely care about that person? I think that's like kind of what I learned is like, you know, genuinely say something because you actually care about that person and, you know, what the outcome may or may not be. And saying, you know, I really don't know what else to say other than I'm thinking about you and, you know, I'm concerned for you. Those are great words to use because that's what you're trying to say is you care, you know, and I appreciated people who said to me, I don't know what to do for you. And I, you know, I even had somebody say, I literally have no idea how to help you, but I want to help. So if you want to list for me the things that I could do for you, I can tell you which ones work for me. And it was like, okay, I need a meal on Friday and Sunday, and I need Haley brought to school. And then they were like, okay. And like, again, that goes all back to like asking for help, because on the other side of it, if somebody says, reach out and tell me what you need, and then you're like, oh, they don't know what I need. Well, of course they don't know what you need.
Of course they don't know. Of course they don't.
You have to tell them what you need.
Yeah, they just asked you. They handed you the key to the kingdom and you just threw it away. Yeah.
Yes. And
Absolutely.
I know how you feel totally is so
Yeah.
annoying because it's like, no, you don't know how I feel because
Oh, fuck
I'm
that,
me and
yeah.
you're you. But here, I'm
Yeah.
going to tell you how I feel and what I need. And that's the next step in being able to provide a community of support. And then I also realized that like there's different layers to what you need. So everyone's layers are going to be different. So, you know, for example, your family layer might be really thick. You might have a super supportive family who, you know, provide a lot of things for you. For me, I don't actually have any of my family living in Victoria. So my family layer is really thin. And if they are to come here, it takes days or whatever for them to get here.
Yeah.
So I've layered my friends' side of things much thicker than my family layer because those people are here in the now. And then, you know, your healthcare providers might be part of your layer and, you know, that kind of thing. And I think it's important to like have your like bubble of people that support those layers so that it's full and that everyone's got like a different, you know, structure to that.
Yeah. And I noticed, by the way, I was looking at I've looked at the Wounded Warriors website a lot over the past couple of years, and any case in which there's someone who is there to help someone else, whether it's an organization or a friend or whatever, it's not like one pep talk you can give to everyone, right? And like I noticed this on the Wounded Warriors, there's all kinds of different little programs depending on the context, and there's something for youth, right? There's like a you know, and there's a group kind of program, and then there's and it's funny because you sort of think that helping someone is helping someone if you've never really had to be in that situation. And I wonder, like, if I was to be building that kind of program, what would be my criteria for someone who needs like a group therapy session versus someone who really needs a one-on-one kind of thing? Someone who will, I have massive faith in pet therapy. Okay, massive. At the school where Camille goes, they use pet therapy as often as they can afford it, because being an inner city public school in an area that is half affluent and half unbelievably not, where kids have varying levels of care or the opposite of care at their homes. You know, this school has a panic room, right? Padded wall thing. There are three teachers whose classes are completely special needs, either emotionally or developmental. And you know, it's funny because I spent my whole life with cats, and this is my first time not having cats for the past 7 odd years. And I've had dogs in the past, and I remember getting home from like terrible news or a bad freaking day, And there's nothing like sitting down and you're about to freaking bawl, and then a dog comes and does this right on your knees, right? Do you know what I'm saying? Or a cat sort of comes and sticks its freaking tail right up into your nose, but then it turns around and like rubs its face against you. And they're not doing that to be therapeutic. They're doing that because they don't have any of those weird masks that we wear to cover our own hell, or to cover the pain, or to cover our sensitive insecurity. And that's, you get a dog. He's like, what? Hey, you're home. Let's play. Right? Oh, you're not feeling well? Because they know, man. They know you're not feeling well.
Yeah.
Right on your knees. So
Well,
I have
and the service
massive.
dog takes that to a whole new level of training where they can actually sense the anxiousness in their owner, or
Absolutely.
wake them up from a nightmare, which is just truly amazing. Yeah, there are multiple levels to the programming that Wounded Warriors Canada provides. So, of course, one-on-one therapy is excellent, and most people I know have seen somebody at some point. But where Wounded Warriors Canada became innovative is understanding that you can't just treat the individual. You need to treat the family. So if a person is struggling with PTSD and they, have a wife and say 2 kids, or a husband and 2 kids, that person is also going to be affected and has to be part of the solution. So they do couples.
I saw that.
Yeah, couples overcoming PTSD every day is one of their programs, and I mean that's life changing because it gives that other person the voice as well as part of the situation. And then again for the children, so just like you need your bubble of people around you, like you need layers to your mental health programming. And the other thing is taking it to the next level in the last couple of years with partnering with specific police, fire, ambulance stations, and providing training on post-traumatic stress disorder prior to it happening, so that you have the skills and you can recognize what's going on, because there is kind of a window of opportunity for PTSD to take hold. And depending on what some of your actions are following an incident can dramatically change the outcome. So giving that kind of training to, an entire department, and also all layers of that department. So the boss all the way down to the new person normalizes that conversation, that it doesn't matter what rank you are. It's the circumstances. It has nothing to do with what uniform you're wearing or, any of that, if people can understand what the actual symptoms are and the circumstances in how it happens, then you're going to be much more willing to bring it up when you have something that you need to talk about. So,
and that's where it becomes very powerful.
That innovation is just incredible, and we're getting somewhere. But the volumes of people, especially now, like if you look at COVID times, how aware everybody is of our first responders and our frontline workers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel that, grocery store clerks, man. Right. And Starbucks. Some of the people who've been watching this week by week will know that when COVID first hit, I did the stupidest thing ever. I went out to get some supplies, by which I mean groceries, and I brought the eldest daughter with me. And so her introduction to COVID was a supermarket where it was like indoor road rage, right? People were piling up with freaking toilet paper and flats of water, and just like hating on each other. And she just sort of curled up in the basket and went to sleep. It's just like, I can't deal. I don't know why I brought her, man. I don't know why I did it. I got through the shopping, gritting my teeth because, I don't really love people and especially when they're like that. But we got home, and it's like she's a tough little girl, right? Like, she'll be doing something and fall over the back of the couch. Like, I'll just see her feet go up and hear this crash as her head hits the ground, and I'll be like, "Oh no!" And then I'll just sort of see, "I'm okay," but emotionally, she's not. She's not, and so she was, she'd be fine, and every now and again, I would start going to her room, and she'd be crying in the corner. I'm like, "Oh, shit." And even now, like, there's all kinds of stuff that she's like, when the coronavirus is gone, can we do this? When the coronavirus is gone, will people like each other better? So it's like this thing got into her head. And I think we're going to be dealing with this for a while.
I've had a few issues too. So my daughter, I asked her, I'm like, so what's the biggest concern you have with the coronavirus? And she's like, well, whether or not we're going to be able to eat. And I was like, oh man, like, I don't know how else to frame it, but like, food is not a shortage. Like, you're not going to be deprived of anything, but same thing, this whole kind of explosion of concern about the shelves being emptied in the grocery stores had a huge impact on our children. I also remember, and I think it's different ages, because your oldest is how old now?
She'll be 9 in like a week and a half.
Okay.
Well, whenever it's the 1st of August.
Yeah, so she's like 2 years younger than Haley. So, like Haley has also gone through, cancer with me in 2 times in a row. And the first time she was 6. And I remember I dropped her off for school one day. And just before she got out of the car, she said, I can picture myself with cancer one day, Mom. And I was just like, oh, like, how do you carry on with your day after that? Like, how do you even?
Yeah, I don't know.
Like, I was devastated that, like, how do you get these things out of your child's head that they should not be worried about at this point? And, even when I was first diagnosed, for about the first 2 months, she didn't really want to touch me. She was not okay with me, like, giving her a kiss before bed, because in her mind, when you are sick, because in school, when you're sick, you don't touch another person. And they're very like, wash your hands and like all that kind of stuff. And so she was like, well, you're sick, so I don't want you to come near me. And then I'm trying to explain, well, I'm sick, but I'm not contagious. And now I'm going to take medication, and that's going to help me, but it's going to make me really sick. And it's just like, yeah. And I actually, my daughter went in with a child psychologist for like since September. And I highly recommend it, in the sense that, like, I don't feel like as a parent that I can be the sole provider for everything for her. And having an outside professional. No, exactly.
You never can.
No, having an outside professional, I feel like, the hard times are not going to go away. I'm not going to be able to take those away from her, but she really does have a lot more sense of like working through the difficult times. For an 11-year-old to have their mother for like about 3 years of her life dealing with treatments every 3 weeks, like that's
almost a third of her life,
that's
right?
Not cool. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
So and what we're dealing with is, I mean, I think that Clemence has been hospitalized a lot because
you're dealing with a lot there. Yeah.
Allergies and stuff like that. But what that means is, when the COVID thing struck, the doctors were like, okay, let's keep this kid safe now, right? So I mean, we are, we're all bunkery. We're taking our shoes off at the door. We're spraying them with like bleach. We're washing. We strip down right at the door and go into the shower.
Spraying them with bleach.
Huh? What?
That's okay.
Yeah.
Don't spray your children with bleach.
No, our shoes and stuff. Yeah.
Oh, shoes. Okay.
Clemence. Okay. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Do I look like Trump? Okay. No politics. But I wonder, like, because there are, there's like a seismic shift between millennials, for instance, who came of age right as the 2008 recession hit versus those who were already kind of older and sort of set up. And so I wonder what Clemence is not going to be affected by this. She has no idea. She's probably picking up on the underlying stress, right? But I don't know what the hell this is doing to Camille in a sort of in the long term.
But you know what? It goes back to all of it. You got to talk about it. And this, I think all of this has shone a big light on what were we doing before? Like, why have our long-term care facilities been so neglected? And these problems existed, but now they're they're not just in some people's face, they're in everybody's face at the same time. And that's overwhelming for sure. But we got to talk about it.
And by the way, is your province mandatory masks in public now?
No.
Okay, because ours is. It's been for a few days now, which is an amazing time to bring up a child, let me tell you. Although, as I said, like, people are a funny thing, people are a really funny thing. People will show this brave face to the world even when they're dying inside, and they'll crumble and they'll fall apart and they'll need to be put back together, which is why organizations like Wounded Warriors can be so important. Or with children, it can be like I did art therapy at school for years. Didn't even know why I was doing it. Right, people are funny. That some will just they'll just disintegrate publicly, and their friends will have to pick up all the pieces, and some will put this really brave face on and just be crumbling to pieces inside. And Camille is the type to put on the brave face and crumble to pieces inside. I'm sort of the same.
Yeah, but Jesse, here you are publicly discussing really important issues, and I know you bring Camille on here as well, and you're not doing nothing about it. Like, you're part of the good change. You're part of the positive influence in the world by putting who you are out there.
That was a deliberate choice,
amazing.
though. Yeah, that was a deliberate choice because I'm not the type to do that, though, right? Because I am the type to not talk about my problems.
But like, way to face it. So, and I don't know. I mean, I think that like that's the key right there, is that you could be an introvert or an extrovert or whatever. At the end of the day, every single human has to relate to another person. You have to have somebody who understands you, or at least listens. And that's the only, and like that rule applies to our children as well. At the end of the day, all we can do is listen, guide, do our best, which isn't always going to be great. And that's it. I mean, that's the key formula. It's really that simple. It's just feels overwhelming that, there's more. What else can I do? What else can I do? But that's all you can do. And you're even taking it further by helping influence other people, which I think is pretty amazing.
Well, and sometimes you got to know when to just shut up and listen, eh? Right? Like, how some people just, they feel like they always got to be helping. And sometimes it's like all you want is let me vent.
I just want to say that somebody named Simon, who says take stock of all the chili con carne from the IMPs. I love it.
Oh, Simo. Because, he knows it well. He's a former serviceman.
Oh my God, too. IMPs. Yeah. I miss them. They don't have IMPs anymore. They've upgraded to like a different style now. They're not
really?
They're not IMPs like we knew them. No, they're like a meal pack still, but it's not the same.
Okay,
like maybe because
the challenge I'm passing to you is to get me some of these, and I'll do a video on them.
Oh, I could get you some for sure.
because there's like millions of people doing IMP. I thought they were still doing. I've still got like
No,
parts.
they're not
I've got
called
the
IMPs anymore. There's something
what?
else. Yeah. Yeah. I'll send you one. You can do a whole thing on it. Yeah.
What?
Hmm.
They've been IMPs forever.
Yeah. But lung in a bag, all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, they don't have those anymore. And if you
Oh,
got the lasagna, you were really excited.
you were like, woo! Even as cadets, we got them every now and again. Fairly often, we just got that boxed lunch thing. Do you remember that?
Yeah, box lunches are still a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Still
Yeah.
buttered on both sides.
Yep.
So that the contents of the sandwich stay in.
Yeah.
Gross.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yes, I
Yeah.
will do that. I'll get you the modern day IMP so you can take it apart.
Oh yeah, I would totally do like a video on that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, we've only got 15 minutes left. This doesn't feel like it's been going on that long. What the hell was I was about to say something brilliant and hilarious, but I don't remember what it was.
Of course you were.
Trust me though, it was going to be brilliant and
I'm
hilarious.
sure of it.
Yeah. Do you ever get sort of an opportunity to make those two sides of your life mesh in any way?
Which two sides?
Like the Wounded Warriors and sort of being involved with the cadet programs. Is there any way that those two things could mesh?
Yeah. I mean, for sure. I've always been a huge advocate of leading and inspiring our youth. My current job with the cadet program is at a desk, not leading or inspiring youth, but rather managing a budget, which is
that's interesting.
part of what needs to happen too. But I still think that my involvement in the community with Wounded Warriors has an impact on the cadet program. When we run the length of Vancouver Island, there's different cadet squadrons and corps that come out and stop at some of our Legion stops, and I get an opportunity to speak at those stops. And those cadets are in the room, and we always take some time to talk to them. And they're at Remembrance Day ceremonies, and they're very strong partners in the community. So for sure, there's definitely a parallel there.
Okay.
They're going to be sort of part of it in the sense that, like, if the military is doing something, they're going to see some of those things as well.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah.
Yeah.
The reason why I was asking that was because when I was in high school, there was this program where students who were interested could go to the geriatrics ward of the Royal Victoria Hospital and just spend the afternoon with, like, we were all paired off with one senior and just sort of talk to them. And because the thing is, in these wards, this is not the same as talking to veterans, obviously, but in these wards, sometimes these people had no one to talk to, right? They were alone, and so it did them some good to have these youngsters show up and just spend the day with them, and how's it going, and blah blah blah, and just interact with them. And so I've always been interested ever since then in the ways that young people and older people who have something in common, whether it's wearing a uniform in any sense or maybe something cultural or whatever. I've always been interested in in the ways that those two groups ever get to see each other. I saw a YouTube video, and I don't remember the name of it. I remember nothing, but it was a British video. I think he was a Royal Marine, maybe Army, whatever, who'd been to Afghanistan or Iraq, and a veteran who had been to D-Day on, I think, Gold, or one of the British beaches, right? And they just sat these guys down in front of each other, right? Army in 1945 and Army in 2020, not the same organization, but certain things are universal. Certain things you can draw a line from today's Army all the way back 200 years ago, kind of thing. And there was a moment where the old guy, this guy's been through D-Day, and he says to the young guy, "You've seen some stuff, haven't you?" And that moment, and the guy is like, "Yes, sir, I have." And that a guy who'd been through D-Day and World War II, which, let's face it, by any count, removed large sections of the entire population of Europe and North America. The fact that someone who'd been through all that could have that moment of compassion to say, "You've been through some stuff, haven't you?" And the guy, he looks at the table. Yes, sir, I have. Because the fact that one guy's stuff was almost 100 years ago and the other guy's stuff was 2010, 2004. PTSD doesn't just sort of disappear after 50 years, does it?
No,
Right?
it's actually a lifetime affliction. Yeah.
You know. And
Yeah,
so
I think you're spot on. I mean, if we could only sit next to every single person and acknowledge that they've been through something, whatever that may be. I mean, it happens in childbirth too, like where, you know, every single woman can say that whatever their childbirth experience is the most epic thing that ever happened. One might be completely different from the other. I personally don't even know what a labor pain feels like because I never had them.
Are you kidding me? Oh, well, of course not.
No, she was born so early.
Yeah.
So, you know, but that was like, I can't imagine how crazy that must feel like. And I'm, you know, grateful, I guess, that I didn't have to experience that. But my experience is still epic for me, you know, even though it was different. Same thing happened, but in a very different way. Simon has a question about, am I working for Pacific Region? I am. I'm working for the Regional Cadet Support Unit Pacific. In Esquimalt.
Oh, in Esquimalt, okay. Thomas also says, feeling acknowledged is a lot of the time more important than a solution. Great points. That acknowledgement is a big, it's a big deal.
I mean, the thing is, like, you cannot have the answers to every single situation. If you're in a survival situation, like, okay, I'm going to go through the pattern of survival, but there isn't always going to be this exact formula that you're just going to apply every time. You're going to have to like figure out whatever your circumstances are at the time and then work it out. But that's the same for every single person. Every single person has something that they have deemed difficult, they're struggling with, they want to achieve, you know, they feel bad about. Like, we can all relate. We've all had those same feelings. It just, the circumstance is going to be a little bit different. So why not take a moment to just listen or understand, or, you know, maybe still disagree, but at least listen. Like, my truth isn't your truth kind of thing. And that's cool. That's fine.
It's what I keep going back to. Everyone's living their own little hell. So just take a step back a minute. I just want to show you what Mallory said, that her fiance, Ben, will be battling PTSD all his life. I didn't want to tell you her and her fiance's story without her actually saying it, but he was in artillery, but he didn't retire out, shall we say. You know, it's amazing how we, and this is true of, you know,
go back to the service too, as well, for anybody who
I you know, snap a uniform on anyone throughout history. I mean, this is true of today, this is true of Mesopotamia, but societies use up our best, sometimes our best minds, sometimes our best bodies in the prime of their lives for things that politicians decide. And
we're not supposed to talk about politics.
I know, that's all I'm going to say about that. But these these people who are sometimes kids, when they go to do terrible things or see terrible things, they never really get past it in some cases. Right? That's what PTSD does. It just it locks you in there. And we didn't know about PTSD hundreds of years ago. We didn't even really know it in World War I, right? Shell shock. That's what we called it.
Shell shock. Yep.
You know?
There's actually a monument in Belgium that is kind of like this dark sort of room that they, like a prison that they used to throw in their same like their same side, not the enemy side, but for anybody who had shell shock, or, you know, in one case there was somebody's information that, like, there was a bomb, so he ran away and then he got captured and thrown in this cell, and then they would take them out and shoot them just outside the window to like teach them a lesson that like, this is how, you shouldn't be a traitor and like that kind of thing. It was just like so heartbreaking to sit there and look at this because the lack of understanding. And at the same time, it was a matter of survival for the people doing it to like figure out how to control their people because they didn't know what else to do. If they let people go free, then they wouldn't have anybody to help them in the first place. So
and it's a lack of understanding of how shell shock worked. A little piece of trivia that I learned through World War One is when I was working at Reader's Digest, I worked with a guy who was a World War II, not a buff, but he was a historian, and his main focus of interest was World War II. Whereas I've always been more drawn to World War One. I've read a lot about it. I'm not going to say I studied it because I didn't. I just read a lot of stuff. Watched everything, read everything I could find. And during World War One, the British were doing the same, right? They were shooting people for not going back to the front, and they were shooting not only British people but Australians and New Zealanders. But the chain of command was different for Canada in such a way that when you saw a Canadian nurse, they all had the rank of lieutenant in the Commonwealth. But for most Commonwealth countries, that was like an honorary rank, whereas in the Canadian Nurses Corps, that was a literal rank. You had to respect that rank. But also, the Canadian government did not allow the British government to shoot Canadians for shell shock. So whereas they shot tens of thousands of Britons and all that, the number of Canadians shot by the British for shell shock in World War One is almost bupkis. I don't know what the hell the Canadian government did for Canadians with shell shock, though. That was just like a little factoid in a book, but they never go into what really, really went on for these poor guys, though, right? Because it's the same as today, right? When people are snapping uniforms on, everybody cares. And as soon as they take the uniform off, it gets a little harder to find someone who cares.
And I was actually in a Legion doing the Wounded Warrior run. And there was a Legionnaire there who, this was about 3 years ago. And, we go in and at each stop, we talk about what our mission is. And he stood up and said, this is the first time that he's ever spoken about struggling from his time in the military, and kind of broke down in front of the room. And it was just like a lesson in like, it's never too late to open up that conversation, and that there's still people who haven't spoken about because they didn't think it was safe to speak about it for so long. But it was just an amazing moment to be like, wow, we came in here and like helped this person free that inner sort of turmoil. And, I'm not saying that just talking about it in a room like that is like a cure, but like it's a step in the right direction.
And it can start a cure.
Yeah. A few people have like talked about on the feed here that they have family members or friends or different people, but anybody that's a first responder, a veteran, serving military is open to like the programs that Wounded Warriors Canada offers. And you just need to go to woundedwarriors.ca and, sign up. Like it's not a commitment. If you want to take a program and you put your name on a waiting list, it doesn't mean you have to take it. And it's all, somebody will contact you. There are wait lists, but it's a step anyways. It doesn't have to be the right fit, but if anybody is interested, it's not, it's open to every single person that's for free. Like it's not
I just want to point out, Mallory said that her fiance was medically released and declared invalid. Oh God, for work at the age of 26. And she follows that up with, she's been with him for 10 years and still has a hard time figuring out what PTSD is. That is probably what one of the biggest problems about PTSD is.
Yeah, there's definitely a huge educational piece. And I'm certainly not the expert on what is PTSD. I'm, more on the charity space for the fundraising events and, like those kinds of events, but there are many experts in the field that are available through Wounded Warriors Canada. And, I would say go to those spaces because there are people there that really do want to help and have the right information and, are doctors and that kind of thing. So, and it is super complicated and, symptoms can be different for each person, but there are similarities and that kind of thing. So, and different treatment plans, just like any medical situation, it's no different than a broken arm that needs to be addressed. It's, a mental injury that needs to be addressed. So yeah, for sure, there's lots of information there.
Yeah, and I'd just like to say to the people watching that you don't have to go through a battlefield to get PTSD. There are people who have PTSD from abuse, right? It's like I don't want people to come away from this this live stream thinking that to have that kind of trouble you have to have gone through a battle. A lot of people have various different kinds of battles that they live through, and very, very few people make it through without some sort of damage.
Well, and PTSD is also not the only mental illness. There are many other mental illnesses as well that, like, we might be talking specifically about PTSD, but there are other layers to that too. So
there are other layers to that.
Equally important. Yeah.
Yeah. And, that's not even to touch on the difference between people who have like a chemical imbalance versus people who are just really dealing with with a shitty hand kind of thing, But I mean, this live stream was supposed to end a minute ago, so we don't have time to really, So, okay, we're at 11 o'clock. So I wanted to thank everyone who has come to hang out with us. I want to thank Jack for coming on and chatting about this stuff. I kind of feel like I need to find an excuse to get you on for another reason at some point in the future.
Thanks for having me.
For everyone who's been here to the bitter end, thank you very much for hanging out. I hope you've enjoyed it. Everybody stay safe, stay healthy, stay sane. And I hope to see you all next week. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.